My husband got rid of me by sending me on vacation abroad. But at the train station, I realized I had forgotten my passport and came home at the wrong time. That's when I found out it was a one-way ticket. Well then, my dear, you'll regret this. Hello, my friends, right where you're watching us from and how old you are. We wish you a pleasant listening experience. They say you don't get to choose your family, but what do you do when you actually have to make a choice? When your family, instead of being your support, becomes a cage you suffocate in for over 20 years? When you realize that your husband doesn't look at you as a beloved woman anymore, but as an annoying obstacle in his life, like an object that's long since lost its value. That July morning smothered our apartment with stifling heat, so heavy that even the curtains seemed to sag from the weight of the hot air. I woke up before the alarm and had already been lying with my eyes open for half an hour, staring at a crack on the ceiling. It had appeared back in the 90s when the neighbors upstairs flooded us. Back then, Nikolai spent a week running from office to office, demanding compensation, but eventually gave up. It's useless to fight our housing authorities, he said. Since then, the crack remained, a thin, winding line like the bed of a dried-up river. Strange that I remembered it now. From the kitchen, I heard sounds. My husband was making breakfast. 22 years of living together had taught me to recognize every rustle of his morning routine. He opened the fridge, pulled out the butter, cut 3 uneven slices of bread, as always. The kettle clattered, the newspaper rustled, the one he'd been subscribing to since 1997, even though he's been reading news online for years. A familiar symphony of our household orchestra. But today, there were some new notes in that music. Something subtle had changed. Nikolai was moving faster than usual. The spoon clinked against the cup more often, as if he were nervous or in a hurry. There was tension in those sounds, strange, anxious anticipation, like he was preparing for something important. I got out of bed, threw on my old robe that I'd never managed to throw away, though Nikolai had hinted more than once that it was time to buy something more modern. I walked to the mirror, ran my hand through my graying hair. Just yesterday, I'd been at my hairdresser, Valentina's salon, on the first floor of the neighboring building. For more than 10 years, she'd been helping me maintain my chestnut color, which started betraying me with gray long before 40. With a figure like yours at 52, she always said, deftly handling her comb, you could outshine plenty of younger women. Look at yourself. No belly, no extra hips. A little color here, and even those wrinkles won't be noticeable. I smiled back gratefully, though I knew it was just politeness. The wrinkles were there, and there were more of them every year. Crow's feet around the eyes, folds by the lips. Time does its job relentlessly. Still, I really did look decent for my age, helped by regular walks in the park and the fact that I'd never smoked, unlike many of my peers. After washing up and putting myself together, I went to the kitchen. Our Khrushchevka had been in need of repairs for years, but we always put it off. Not enough money, not enough time. The linoleum in the hallway was cracked, the wallpaper in the living room faded, and the bathroom I won't even mention. Whenever I brought up repairs, Nikolai would frown and say, "Later, Timochka. Once I close the deal with Vitaly Petrovich, we'll talk." And it's been 3 years of talking about this mythical deal that was supposed to bring us, if not wealth, at least a slightly above average life. I'd stopped believing, but I nodded obediently, pretending to understand. Nikolai was sitting at the kitchen table, buried in his tablet, a gift from his colleagues for his 55th birthday last year. In front of him, next to his coffee cup, lay 2 narrow slips of paper, tickets it seemed. When I walked in, he looked up sharply, as if I'd caught him off guard, and then smiled. Too wide, too fake. The kind of smile he wore when lying or hiding something. I knew him too well after all these years. "Timochka, my dear," he said, putting the tablet aside and getting up to meet me. "I was just about to wake you. I have a surprise for you." He said it with such forced cheer that everything inside me tightened. Something wasn't right. Nikolai wasn't the type of man who liked surprises. The last time he surprised me was with a food processor for our 20th anniversary, and only after I'd spent a week hinting that the old one had completely broken. "What surprise?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm and curious, though unease was already rising inside me. I went to the fridge, pulled out milk for my coffee, checked the yogurt I'd bought yesterday at Padarochka on a 2-for-1 deal. With a solemn air, he handed me those slips of paper. I saw they really were tickets. A vacation package to Turkey, in Antalya. A 5-star hotel right by the sea. All inclusive. Nikolai came up behind me, placed his hands on my shoulders, massaged lightly, a gesture he hadn't made in at least 5 years. You'll get to rest, relax, regain your strength. I can see how tired you are from housework, from this heat. The train to Moscow leaves tomorrow at 10 a.m., then the evening flight. I've organized everything, the airport transfer, a room with a sea view. I took the tickets with trembling fingers. The sunlight glinting on the glossy surface revealed my name and the departure date. 2 weeks in Turkey, without Nikolai. My husband, who hadn't given me flowers in 3 years, and even then they were chrysanthemums from the local market, practical flowers that last long, suddenly splurging on a foreign resort? That's very generous of you, I said slowly, studying the tickets. But what about you? You could use a break too. Nikolai waved dismissively, too casually. You know how it is with this tender. Vitaly Petrovich needs the documents by Monday. I just can't get away. He sighed, posing as the overworked man. But I'm so glad you can finally have a real rest. I can't imagine how bored you must have been all these years within these 4 walls. I nodded, hiding my eyes. Bored, yes. My life really had become like Groundhog Day from that American movie. Cleaning, cooking, shopping, watching Magnificent Century, the show my neighbor Irina had recommended. Rare get-togethers with friends, rarer each year as my world shrank to the size of our 3-room Khrushchevka. Once I'd worked as a translator from English and French at Kultura Publishing House, translating articles for academic journals. I dreamed of business trips to Paris, a career in a large international company. My professor at the institute used to tell me, "You, Tamara, have a phenomenal ear for languages." But then I met Nikolai. Back then, he worked with some instruments, serious, solid. He convinced me that the family needed a keeper of the hearth, not a career woman, that a man should provide and a woman should create comfort. And I believed him. I left behind my promising career, dedicated myself to home, to him, to his mother, who was ill and lived with us for the last 5 years of her life. And then, almost without noticing, my youth slipped away, dissolved in endless care for others. "Thank you," I finally said. "This really is unexpected." "Perfect," he replied, kissing me on the cheek. His lips felt cold despite the heat. "Today you'll pack, and tomorrow, a new life, a new life." Those words echoed in my head as Nikolai, finishing his coffee, withdrew to his study, the former children's room he had converted into a home office 10 years ago when he started freelancing. We never had children. At first, we postponed, wanting to get settled. Then there were fertility issues. Later, doctors said it was too late and too risky. I stayed in the kitchen, holding the tickets, trying to understand why instead of joy, I felt an ever-growing unease. Something wasn't right, definitely not right. Maybe it was because in all our years together, Nikolai had never shown such spontaneous generosity, or because of how quickly and firmly he refused to come with me, as if it had been planned all along. Or maybe it was the way he avoided my eyes when he spoke of how happy he was for me. I set the tickets down on the table and started making myself breakfast, but my thoughts drifted far away from eggs and toast. Memories of the last few months of our life together surfaced. How Nikolai began staying late at work more often, how his gaze had changed when he looked at me, almost as if he were looking through me. How his business trips to the nearby regional center had become more frequent. I used to blame it all on midlife crisis, on the fatigue of routine. But now those memories pieced together into an uneasy mosaic. The last time we'd made love was 6 months ago, on my birthday, and even then it felt more like fulfilling a marital duty than passion. After that, he started complaining about high blood pressure, back pain, exhaustion, and sometimes he smelled of perfume, not mine, something sweeter, unfamiliar. While I was lost in thought, the phone rang. It was my old friend Svetlana. We studied together at the institute. "Hi, Toma. How are you? Did I wake you?" "No, don't worry. I've been up for a while," I replied, holding the receiver between my shoulder and ear while stirring my coffee. "Listen, do you remember we wanted to go to the theater this weekend? I managed to get tickets for the Cherry Orchard at Sovremennik, front row, no less." "Oh, Sveta," I sighed. "But I'm flying to Turkey tomorrow. Can you believe it? Nikolai gave me a package tour." There was a pause on the other end. "Kolya? A trip?" Svetlana's voice carried such genuine astonishment that I couldn't help but smirk. "Yes, that very same Kolya, who gave me a kitchen set for my birthday, saying, 'Well, you like cooking, don't you? Yes, imagine that. He suddenly showed unexpected generosity. And where are you two going? Not we, just me. He's staying behind. Something about work and a project, you understand? Another pause, longer this time. Toma, don't you find that strange? Svetlana asked cautiously. I do, I admitted. Very strange. Maybe he, I don't know, found someone else and just wants some time without you? I hesitated. Of course, the thought had crossed my mind, but I had pushed it away. After all, 22 years together, what mistresses could there be at our age? Still, anything's possible. I don't know, Sveta. Maybe he really just wanted to do something nice for me. He sees I'm tired. Well, either way, you'll get some rest. Sea, sun, buffet meals, Svetlana said, trying to sound cheerful. You'll tell me all about it when you get back. The theater isn't going anywhere. After hanging up, my anxiety only grew. If even she, who didn't know Nikolai as well as I did, instantly suspected something was off, then my unease wasn't baseless. Something was definitely wrong. I decided I had to find out what. When Nikolai left, I remained alone in the apartment. Suddenly, it felt foreign. 20 years within these walls, and today everything looked different. The faded curtains, the sagging sofa, the dusty crystal in the display cabinet. Like a museum of a bygone era. I didn't feel like packing. Something gnawed at me, some unformed dread. Instead, I decided to call the travel agency listed on the tickets. Flamingo Travel Agency, a friendly female voice answered. Hello, this is Tamara Sergeyevna. I'd like to confirm some details about a trip to Turkey. After checking my information, the girl confirmed, yes, a 14-day package at the Blue Oasis, 5-star sea view. Flight from Moscow tomorrow at 8 p.m. single occupancy, correct? I felt my heart race. Single occupancy? That's right. This was a special promotion for solo travelers. Your package was paid for by Nikolai Andreevich. And when was the booking made? It was paid a month ago, on June 15. A month ago, so it wasn't a spontaneous decision. Nikolai had been planning this trip for an entire month, only to present it as a surprise today. Compelled by an impulse, I went to the document cabinet. I pulled out my passport. Everything was in order. Checked our savings envelope behind the books. 30,000 rubles still there. I was about to close the cabinet when my eyes landed on a folder. Inside, I found a contract dated last year. My dread grew as I read it. A loan agreement for 1.5 million rubles secured by our apartment. At the bottom were 2 signatures, Nikolai's and mine. But I had never signed such a document. The signature looked a lot like mine, but there were tiny, telling differences. My head spun. It was all starting to add up into a horrifying picture. Money I never knew about. A forged signature. And now, this trip to Turkey. I decided to check Nikolai's computer in his study. Usually, he locked the door, but today, in his rush, he'd forgotten. The computer booted without a password. Browsing history revealed a bookmarked dating site. My chest tightened. I clicked it. There it was, Nikolai's profile. Age, 49. Status, divorced. Looking for a serious relationship. Divorced. We were not divorced. We were still married. In his messages, I found correspondence with a certain Valentina, age 36. They'd been writing for more than half a year. The latest message, from just yesterday, made my blood run cold. My dear, tomorrow I'm sending her on vacation. 2 weeks of freedom just for us. That'll be enough time to settle everything with the apartment. By the time she comes back, we'll already be living together, and she'll have no choice but to accept the divorce. The doorbell rang. I jumped, quickly closed everything, and shut down the computer. Who is it? I asked, approaching the door. City Express Courier Service. Delivery for Tamara Sergeyevna. A young courier handed me a small box. Inside was a brand new smartphone and a note for staying in touch while traveling. Don't forget to call when you arrive. Svetlana, my loyal friend. I turned on the phone. It was already set up, with apps installed. I called her immediately and burst into tears, telling her everything I had discovered. That bastard, Svetlana exclaimed. I always said he was slippery. So what are you going to do now? What should I do, Sveta? You have 2 options, cause a scene right now, or pretend you don't know anything and use the time to gather more evidence. I'd recommend the second. I don't think I can pretend. Yes, you can, Toma. You used to work as a translator at international conferences, remember? You know how to keep a straight face. She was right. If I gave myself away, Nikolai would deny everything and push ahead with his plan. I needed to act smarter. I need a good lawyer. And help with the documents, I said. I know someone, Mikhail Borisovich. I can arrange a meeting today. And photograph the documents with your new phone. An hour later, we met with the lawyer at Cafe Acacia. If what you're saying is true, your husband has committed multiple offenses, said Mikhail Borisovich after listening to me. Forgery of a signature on a financial document, that's a criminal matter, but we need evidence. What about the apartment? Can he sell it without your consent? Not if it's joint property. But since the loan agreement lists it as collateral, with what appears to be your signature, even if forged, there could be complications. What do you advise? I asked. File a request with Rose Reister, report the forged signature to the police, and initiate divorce proceedings on your terms, with a claim for property division. How long will this take? A few days to prepare the documents, but the first steps can be taken as early as tomorrow. But tomorrow I'm supposed to leave for Turkey. In that case, you have two options, said the lawyer. Either you refuse the trip outright, or you pretend to go but stay in town. That would give us the advantage of surprise. I'll take the second option, I said firmly. But where will you live for these 2 weeks? With me, Svetlana replied instantly. I have a 3-room apartment. 1 room is free. It'll be just like our student days. The plan was ready. I would pretend to go to Turkey, but instead I'd move in with Svetlana for 2 weeks. And during that time, we'd start the legal proceedings. Returning home, I found Nikolai in the living room. He was watching football and drinking beer from a mug that read, Best Husband in the World. Where have you been? He asked without taking his eyes off the screen. Shopping, buying a few things for the trip, I answered, trying to sound casual. A new swimsuit, sunscreen? Good. He nodded. If you're going to relax, then do it properly. Did you pack your suitcase? Almost. Just need to put in my makeup bag and check the documents. I already put your passport in the side pocket of the suitcase so you don't forget, he informed me. Thank you, darling. I forced a smile. That's very thoughtful of you. All evening I played the role of a happy wife, thrilled about the upcoming trip. I asked him about Turkey, the sights, the weather. Nikolai answered absent-mindedly, clearly thinking about something else. Later, lying in bed and listening to him snore, I thought about the day ahead. Tomorrow a new chapter of my life would begin. Let Nikolai think he was sending me off on my last journey as his wife, but I would be the one to write the ending. All right, dear, I thought, staring at his profile in the dark. You'll regret this. The next morning was just as hot as the day before. It felt as though even nature itself conspired with Nikolai, creating the perfect backdrop for his plans. Who wouldn't want to be by the sea in this weather? I woke before the alarm. To be honest, I barely slept at all. I spent the night tossing and turning, going over every detail of the coming day. Snippets of yesterday's conversations kept running through my mind. I replayed Nikolai's messages to Valentina, thought about the forged signature, the mortgaged apartment. Anger, hurt, disappointment, all of it swirled inside me. But I had to stay calm. One mistake could cost me everything. Nikolai was already bustling in the kitchen when I came out of the bedroom. Unlike me, he looked cheerful, even energized. He was making breakfast, eggs with tomatoes, just the way I liked it. He hadn't shown that kind of care in ages. Good morning, traveler, he smiled at me with the same smile that once won me over at a college party. How did you sleep before the big trip? Not bad, I lied, sitting down at the table. Just a little nervous. First time going abroad alone, nothing to worry about. He placed a plate of eggs and a cup of coffee in front of me. Everyone speaks Russian there. The hotel has a guide. And you know languages. You be fine. I looked at him and couldn't believe this attentive man, who remembered how I liked my breakfast and worried about my comfort abroad, was the same one planning to discard me from his life like an unwanted thing. 22 years together, and just like that, Kola? I decided to test him a little. Maybe you could come with me after all, take a vacation, put off your work. It would do us good to spend some time together. His face froze for a moment, then he forced a smile. Tomochka, you know I would if I could, but I can't. This tender, it determines the company's future. Vitaly Petrovich is counting on me. Besides, why would you want an old grouch ruining your vacation? Enjoy yourself. Make new friends. Make new friends. That was new. He used to be jealous even of store clerks if they were too friendly with me. You're such a grumpy old man, I made myself smile playfully. Any young woman would envy me. He blushed and looked away, as if I'd hit a sore spot, probably thinking of Valentina, to whom he'd lied about his age. "You look young yourself," he muttered. "Now finish up and get ready. The train's at 10, and you still have to get to the station." I decided to make my first move. "No need to see me off. You've got enough on your plate, and I can manage. I'm not a child." Nikolai froze with his cup halfway to his lips. "Are you sure?" "I can make time. Absolutely." I smiled. "I'll call a taxi, get to the station, and in Moscow I'll take another taxi to the airport. Everything's covered in the package." Right, he nodded, and I thought I saw relief flash in his eyes. "But call me when you get to Moscow, and again from Turkey." "Of course," I promised, finishing my coffee. After breakfast came the final preparations. I packed my toiletries, a couple of books for the beach, a sun hat. Nikolai fussed around, giving advice, checking tickets and documents. "Don't forget the sunscreen," he said, handing me the tube. "Otherwise you'll burn on the first day." "Thanks." I slipped it into my bag, mentally noting his unusual attentiveness. When everything was ready, Nikolai carried the suitcase to the hallway. There was still an hour before I had to leave, so we sat together in the living room. I glanced around the room, thinking that I might be seeing it like this for the last time. If Nikolai's plan worked, in 2 weeks another woman would be living here, young, ambitious Valentina, taking my place. "What are you thinking about?" Nikolai asked, catching my look. "Oh, nothing," I shrugged. "Just feels strange to travel alone after all these years." He sat down next to me and took my hand, a gesture I hadn't seen from him in a very long time. "Timochka, it's only for 2 weeks. You'll rest, get some sun, and when you come back, everything will be—" He hesitated, searching for words. "Different. Better. Different." Oh yes, new indeed. I barely managed to stop myself from shouting, "I know about Valentina, about the loan, about the forged signature." Instead, I squeezed his hand and smiled. "Yes, of course. Everything will be new." Finally, it was time to leave. The taxi was waiting downstairs, or rather, Svetlana's brother Alexei's car, though Nikolai didn't know that. I threw on a light coat, unnecessary in the heat, but it completed the disguise. Nikolai checked my bag once more. Passport, tickets, money, all there. He smiled. "Well then, have a good trip." He hugged me, and for a moment I thought I felt something genuine in his embrace. Maybe deep down he still had feelings for me. Or maybe it was just another act, like mine. "Thanks for the gift." I kissed him on the cheek. "See you in 2 weeks. Of course." He helped me with the suitcase. "Don't forget to call." I went down to the car where Alexei was waiting, a tall man in his 40s, kind-faced with graying temples. Nikolai watched from the balcony as we loaded the suitcase into the trunk and I got into the back seat. I waved to him, and the car pulled away. Only when we turned the corner and he was out of sight did I finally exhale with relief. "Alexei, thank you so much. You can't imagine how much you're helping me." "No problem," he smiled. Sveta explained everything. "Where to now? The station or straight to her place?" "To the station first," I said. "I need to pick something up from the storage room." Last night, while Nikolai was watching football, I had managed to pack the most important documents, photos, and some personal things I didn't want to leave behind. Svetlana helped me take the bag to the station and leave it in storage. On the way, I nervously checked my phone. Would Nikolai call? But he didn't. He was probably already talking to Valentina, reporting that the cargo had been shipped and the next stage of the plan could begin. At the station, I quickly retrieved my bag and headed out with Alexei. Suddenly, panic gripped me. What if Nikolai came to check whether I actually boarded the train? What if he was here right now, watching me? "Alexei." I glanced around anxiously. "Let's hurry. I feel like someone's following me." "Don't worry," he said calmly. "Even if your husband is here, he won't see you. We'll leave through the staff entrance. I know a guard." It turned out Alexei had once worked for the railway and still kept connections with his former colleagues. Thanks to that, we slipped out through the staff exit and were soon on our way to Svetlana's blonde, slim, about 35. In her social media photos, she was always smiling, lots of selfies. Nothing special, there are millions like her. I couldn't help comparing her image with myself. Chestnut hair with gray strands, wrinkles around my eyes, a tired look. Of course, at 52, I couldn't compete with a 35-year-old. But the point wasn't age or appearance. Nikolai betrayed our love, our family, our marriage. And it wasn't even that he fell in love with another woman. That happens. It was how vilely he acted, how he lied, how he planned to get rid of me. Don't think about her. Svetlana seemed to read my mind. She's not to blame. Or maybe she is, but not nearly as much as Nikolai. He's the one who vowed fidelity to you. He's the one who promised to be with you in sorrow and in joy, and he's the one who broke all those promises. I nodded, realizing my friend was right. I needed to focus on the main thing, protecting my rights, making sure Nikolai didn't carry out his plan. After lunch, Svetlana and I began working on the next steps. She suggested using her contacts in the travel business to get information about a real hotel in Turkey, where I supposedly went, just in case Nikolai decided to check. I have a friend who works with that region, Svetlana said. She can give a detailed description of the hotel, photos, even names of some employees. If your dear husband starts asking questions, you'll be ready. You think he'll check? Better to be safe. He's not stupid. He could suspect something. I agreed. We drew up a rough plan of my virtual travels around Turkey, when and where I would call Nikolai, which places I would visit, what impressions I would share. Svetlana even suggested making a few photos of me against the backdrop of the sea and palm trees. She had pictures from her last year's vacation, which could be edited in Photoshop. Isn't that over the top? I doubted. No, not if we want him not to suspect anything, Svetlana said firmly. Nowadays, everyone posts vacation photos on social media. If you don't, it might look odd. That evening the phone rang. It was Nikolai. I glanced at Svetlana, and she nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, I answered. Hi, Kolya. Toma, finally, impatience rang in his voice. I was starting to worry. Did you land? How's the hotel? All fine, I tried to sound cheerful and casual. The flight was a little delayed, but overall it was okay. The hotel is wonderful. Huge pool, palm trees, flowers everywhere, and the sea just steps from my room. Great, Nikolai sounded pleased. And the room, is it comfortable? Very. Big bed, air conditioner, balcony with a sea view, just as you promised. Though the shower leaks a little, but that's minor. I made sure to add little everyday details to make it sound real. Svetlana gave me a thumbs up. And how are you? I asked, shifting the topic. Oh, the same as always. His voice carried a note of boredom. Working, preparing documents for the tender. Vitaly Petrovich called today, pushing for the report. Vitaly Petrovich, the very man to whom Nikolai owed $1.5 million under the mortgage of our apartment. I wondered if that man knew the signature on the contract was forged. Send him my regards, I said with irony. Nikolai, of course, didn't catch. Sure, he replied absent-mindedly. All right, get some rest. Will you call tomorrow? Of course, I promised. A week of my Turkish vacation passed. In that time, I settled into Svetlana's apartment, made friends with her cat Marquis, and even began to feel a bit freer, without the constant tension that had followed me for years with Nikolai. Every day, I called my husband, telling him about the wonderful vacation, about excursions to the ancient city of Ephesus, about Turkish baths, fruit, and local cuisine. Svetlana supplied me with all the necessary details, and her colleague from the travel agency even sent hotel and area photos so I could describe the places realistically. Nikolai listened with feigned interest, asked routine questions, and always hurried to end the conversation under the excuse of being busy. I felt he was only going through the motions, maintaining the image of a caring husband. Meanwhile, our plan with the lawyer was progressing. Mikhail Borisovich filed the police report about the forged signature on the loan, submitted a request to Rose Reister, and began preparing for divorce proceedings. But the most interesting part was the information we received about Nikolai's activities in my absence. It turned out that the very next day after my departure, Valentina moved in with him. Svetlana's acquaintance working in the security service of the shopping center opposite our house got the information. The cameras caught a young blonde with a suitcase entering the building, and Nikolai helping her with the bags. They weren't hiding, behaving like a couple who had long been living together. That bastard, Svetlana fumed, showing me the camera footage. He didn't even wait until you actually landed in Turkey. It hurt to see those images, but at the same time, they strengthened my resolve to see this through. Now we had documentary proof of his infidelity. What's more, Mikhail Borisovich told us that the loan contract had raised serious suspicion, with the investigator assigned to review my statement. Experts already gave a preliminary conclusion that the signature is forged, the lawyer said when he came to meet with us. Moreover, it turned out your husband took more than one loan against the apartment. There are 2 more agreements with different creditors. How is that possible? I asked in shock. Can you mortgage the same apartment multiple times, not officially, not through a bank? But your husband took private loans from individuals who likely didn't check the documents properly. In fact, he pulled off a fraudulent scheme. The discovery shook me. Nikolai wasn't just planning to get rid of me to start a new life with his young mistress. He was drowning in debts I knew nothing about. And how much does he owe altogether? I asked, feeling a chill inside. Preliminarily, about 4 million rubles, Mikhail Borisovich answered. Plus interest, growing every month. 4 million. A huge sum for our family. The apartment was worth more, around 7 million at today's prices, but still, how had he gotten into such debt? And most importantly, what did he spend the money on? We're checking his bank accounts, the lawyer continued, but already we see a large part of the funds went to jewelry stores, expensive clothing boutiques, restaurants. I think he was spoiling his new girlfriend. At my expense, I said bitterly. At the expense of our joint property. At that moment, I felt not so much hurt as exhaustion and emptiness. The man I'd spent 22 years with turned out not only to be unfaithful, but a swindler, ready to destroy our life for a fleeting passion. So what now? I asked, looking at the lawyer. We have enough evidence. More than enough, Mikhail Borisovich nodded. But I suggest one more step, meeting with Valentina. Why? I was surprised. What good would that do? Maybe she doesn't know the whole truth about your husband. Maybe he's lying to her too. Svetlana, who had been silent, suddenly lit up. That's true. What if she doesn't know about his debts or that he's married? What if he told her he's been divorced for years? The idea was intriguing. I remembered Nikolai's profile on a dating site where he'd stated he was divorced. Quite possible he told Valentina the same. All right, I decided, let's meet her. But how do we arrange it so Nikolai doesn't find out? Leave it to me, said Mikhail Borisovich. I have a plan. The plan turned out to be simple and effective. The lawyer found out that Valentina went to the Olympia Fitness Club in the city center every Tuesday and Thursday. She usually spent about 2 hours there from 6 to 8 in the evening. At that time, Nikolai was always at work, staying late as he had done for years. On Thursday, exactly at 7 p.m., I arrived at the fitness club. Svetlana insisted on giving me light makeup and styling my hair. You can't meet a rival looking worse than her, she said. I didn't argue, though I considered this meeting a business one, not a beauty contest. Valentina turned out to be exactly as I imagined from the photos, a slim blonde with a good figure, well-groomed, in fashionable sportswear. She was just leaving the locker room when I approached her. Valentina? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She looked at me in surprise. Yes, that's me. And who are you? My name is Tamara. I'm the wife of Nikolai Andreevich. Her face changed instantly. First confusion, then shock, then fear. Wife? She repeated in a trembling voice. But he said he was divorced, that his ex-wife had gone abroad. As you can see, I'm not an ex, I smiled, trying not to show my anxiety. And I never went abroad either. I never left at all. Valentina looked around nervously, as if searching for an escape. Listen, I don't want any scandals if you came here to make a scene. No, I cut her off. That's not why I'm here. I need to talk to you. Not here. Maybe in the cafe across the street? She hesitated for a second, but then nodded. We crossed over to a small coffee shop, chose a table in the corner, away from the other visitors. I ordered us tea, I said as I returned from the counter. I hope you don't mind. Valentina sat nervously fiddling with her watch strap. All her initial confidence had vanished. What do you want? She asked directly when I sat down opposite her. Money? For you to leave Coley alone? No, I shook my head. Neither. I just want you to know the truth about the man you're with. What truth? Her voice held defiance, but her eyes betrayed uncertainty. Nikolai Andreevich is not divorced. We're still married, and no divorce papers were ever filed. He sent me on vacation to Turkey, but I accidentally found out that he planned to get rid of me so he could start a new life with you. Valentina turned pale. That That must be some mistake. Kolya couldn't do that. He loves me. We're planning to get married. We're going to have a baby." I froze. A baby. The news hit me like a hammer. So she was pregnant with Nikolai's child? That's why he was rushing everything. "How long have you been together?" I asked, trying to keep calm. "More than a year," Valentina replied, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought he was honest with me. He said he divorced 3 years ago, that his ex-wife had moved to Germany." "Germany?" I almost laughed bitterly. I didn't even know German. Nikolai's imagination had no limits. "And what did he tell you about his finances?" I pressed, remembering the debts. "He said he had a stable business, that he was a partner in a consulting firm, that he'd saved for the apartment we're now renovating." I took copies of the loan agreements from my bag, the ones my lawyer gave me, and placed them before her. "This is what's really happening with that apartment. It's mortgaged to 3 different lenders for a total of about 4 million rubles. And Nikolai forged my signature on these papers. An investigation is already underway." Valentina's hands trembled as she picked up the papers, scanning the text. Her face grew paler by the second. "I didn't know," she whispered. "He told me the apartment was entirely his, that he'd bought out his ex-wife's share after the divorce." "This apartment is our joint marital property," I said firmly. "And we're still married. Look, here's our marriage certificate, and here's the housing register showing we're both listed." I showed her the documents I had brought. Valentina stared at them, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Why are you telling me all this?" she asked, raising her eyes to mine. "Do you want revenge? To humiliate me?" "No." I shook my head. "I want you to know who you're really dealing with. Nikolai deceives not only me, but you as well. He's drowning in debt, forging documents, and who knows what else he might drag you into, especially now when you're expecting a child." Valentina lowered her head. Her shoulders trembled. She was crying quietly. "I loved him," she whispered. "I believed every word. I thought I'd finally found a decent man who would be a good father to my baby." Strangely, I didn't feel hatred or even jealousy toward her in that moment, only pity. She was just as much a victim of his lies as I was. "Valentina," I said softly, touching her hand, "I don't want to interfere in your relationship with Nikolai, but you need to think about yourself and your child. A man who can deceive 2 women at once so cold-bloodedly is hardly a reliable partner." She raised her tearful eyes to me. "What should I do?" "That's only for you to decide," I answered. "But if you ever want to talk or if you need help, here's my number." I scribbled my phone number on a napkin and handed it to her. Valentina took it and tucked it into her sports jacket pocket. "Thank you," she said softly. You're not at all like he described you. How did he describe me?" I couldn't resist asking. "He said you were cold, calculating, that all those years you only cared about money, that you never really loved him." I gave a bitter smile. A classic tactic, to smear the ex in order to justify himself to the new woman. Except I wasn't an ex, I was still his legal wife. We parted after half an hour. Valentina looked shocked and confused, but the naive shine in her eyes was gone. I hoped she would make the right decision, for her own sake and her baby's. Back at Svetlana's, I told her about the meeting. She listened carefully and then asked, "So what now? Do you think she'll leave him?" "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "But the main thing is, she knows the truth now. The rest is up to her." That evening, Nikolai called. I answered as usual, keeping my tone carefree. "Hi, darling, how are you?" "Fine," he said, but his voice sounded strangely tense. "How's your vacation?" "Wonderful. Today I went on an excursion to the mountains, saw ancient cave churches." "So interesting. What about you?" "Working," he answered shortly. Then, after a pause, "Toma, is everything all right with you? Nothing unusual happening?" My heart skipped a beat. Had Valentina already told him about our meeting? Or did he suspect something? "Everything's fine," I replied as naturally as I could. "Why do you ask? You sound strange." "No, it's just—" He hesitated. "Just worried, that's all. You're alone there, in a foreign country. Don't worry, it's safe here. Lots of Russian tourists, and the hotel staff speak Russian. I feel at home." "Good," he said, relief audible in his voice. "Then rest. Will you call tomorrow?" "Of course," I promised, adding, "Love you, and I love you," he replied mechanically, and hung up. I lowered the phone. Something had changed. Nikolai was tense, worried, asking unusual questions. Either Valentina had said something, or he himself had started to suspect. "We need to be careful. Svetlana warned when I shared my fears with her. Maybe it's time to pause all active moves so as not to spook him. But it was already too late. The next day, I got a call from Mikhail Borisovich. Tamara Sergeyevna, we have a problem. Your husband found out about the police report and the registry request. He's urgently trying to annul all the loan agreements and backdate a divorce. How is that possible? I asked in alarm. How did he find out? He must have connections in law enforcement. But don't worry, it won't help him. We already have enough evidence of his fraud. Still, we'll need to act faster now. What should I do? Prepare for your return, the lawyer said firmly, and earlier than planned. I think we should pay a visit to your apartment in the coming days. The decision to return earlier was risky, but necessary. Mikhail Borisovich insisted that I not warn Nikolai. We needed to catch him off guard the day before the operation, the return. We gathered at Svetlana's apartment, me, the lawyer, Svetlana's brother Alexei, and the district officer with whom Mikhail Borisovich had arranged an escort. Tamara Sergeyevna, here's what we'll do. The lawyer spread the documents on the table. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., we will come to your apartment. You have the keys, so we have every right to enter. The presence of the officer guarantees that your husband won't cause trouble. I will read out the resolution to open a criminal case on forgery of documents. You will assert your rights to the property. And if Valentina is there? I asked anxiously. All the better, replied Mikhail Borisovich. More witnesses to his reaction. But after our conversation, I doubt she's still with him. I wasn't so sure. Despite the tears and shock, Valentina might have decided to stay with Nikolai for the sake of the child. After all, she had something to lose. That night before the return, I hardly slept. Fragments of phrases, memories, plans kept spinning in my head. 22 years of marriage were coming to an end. Not the way I had imagined in my dreams of family happiness. Instead of warm words of gratitude and quiet evenings surrounded by grandchildren, police protocols, lawyers, and evidence of betrayal. In the morning, I put on my best pantsuit, the one I had brought from home on the first day. I carefully styled my hair and applied light makeup. Not to look beautiful, but to feel more confident. How do I look? I asked Svetlana, who greeted me in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. Like a woman going to important negotiations, not crawling back to her husband, she said. And that's right. You're going to defend your rights, not beg for forgiveness. By 10:30, we pulled up to my building. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would jump out of my chest. I looked up at the windows of our apartment on the 3rd floor. The curtains were drawn, as usual in the mornings. Ready? Asked Mikhail Borisovich. I nodded, and we entered the stairwell. The elevator I knew by heart, the smell of the stairwell, the worn banister. Everything brought back memories of my former life. Here, Nikolai and I had once carried up a new sofa, gasping for air and laughing from exhaustion. Here, the neighbor from the 5th floor would always stop to talk about her grandchildren. Here I had returned countless times with grocery bags, thinking about dinner for my husband. On the 3rd floor, I pulled out the keys. My hand trembled, and I missed the keyhole at first. Allow me, Alexei said gently, taking the keys. The door opened silently. I always made sure the hinges were well oiled. From inside came the sound of a TV and the smell of coffee. We stepped into the hallway. I noticed women's shoes I had never seen before. Apparently, Valentina was here after all. And there were boxes, bags. It looked like they were preparing for a renovation or a move. Kolya, I called, stepping into the living room. The TV fell silent. Nikolai appeared from the kitchen with a cup of coffee in his hand and froze when he saw us. His face expressed such astonishment that in another situation it might have seemed comical. Toma, he stammered, you're in Turkey. As you see, I'm not, I replied calmly. I never left, and I know everything about your plans. From the bedroom came Valentina, wearing a house robe that was far too familiar. It was mine, a gift from Nikolai on my last birthday. Seeing me, she froze, but her gaze showed no fear this time, only determination and a strange solidarity. What is happening? Nikolai finally managed, looking from me to the officer and the lawyer. What's happening, Nikolai Andreevich? Mikhail Borisovich began formally, is that a criminal case has been opened against you for forgery of signatures on financial documents. There is also an investigation into fraud involving loans secured by property. This must be some mistake, Nikolai muttered, but panic was already in his eyes. Toma, what did you tell these people? What forgeries? What loans? Don't bother, Kolya. I stepped closer. I know about the contracts with Vitaly Petrovich and the other creditors. I know about your dating site where you posed as divorced. I know about your plans to get rid of me so you could start a new life with Valentina. And I know about the child. At the mention of the child, Nikolai flinched and glanced quickly at Valentina. She met his look coldly. Yes, Kolya, I told her, Valentina said firmly. When I found out you lied to me about the divorce, the apartment, and your finances. Nikolai looked helplessly from her to me and back again, as if unable to believe the two women he deceived had united against him. Listen, he began, but the officer interrupted. Citizen, it's better not to make statements without a lawyer. Anything you say can be used against you. Nikolai sank onto a chair, clutching his head in his hands. For the first time in all our years together, I saw him so broken, so pitiful. What will happen now? He asked quietly. Now, said Mikhail Borisovich, you will accompany me and the officer to the station to give testimony. Tamara Sergeyevna will remain in the apartment as its rightful owner. After that, the court will decide your fate. Nikolai raised his eyes to me. Toma, will you really take me to court? After all these years together? It was that same look he had always used to get my forgiveness, guilty, pleading, with a hint of promise to change. I had always given in before, but not today. Yes, Kolya, I will, I said firmly. Because you left me no choice. You planned to take away everything, my home, my property, even my chance to defend myself. You planned my disappearance with such coldness, as if I were not your wife, but some disposable object. He lowered his head. What could he say? Deny the obvious? It was too late for that. You may gather necessary items and documents, the officer said, and you'll have to come with us. Nikolai nodded silently and went to the bedroom, the officer following to monitor him. Valentina and I stayed in the living room, looking at each other in silence. Despite the awkwardness, there was no hostility between us. I'll move out today, she finally said. I'm sorry I occupied your apartment. Don't apologize, I replied. You're also a victim of his lies. What will you do now? I'll go back to my mother, she said, running her hand over her stomach. I'll raise the child alone. Now I know for sure Nikolai Andreevich won't give any support. If you need help, I began, but she stopped me with a gesture. Thank you, but I'll manage. Don't worry about me. Better take care of yourself. Half an hour later, Nikolai, the officer, and Mikhail Borisovich left. Valentina quickly packed her things and also left, promising to return the keys in the evening. I was alone. A strange feeling overcame me as I walked through the apartment where I had lived for so many years. Our bedroom, where Nikolai and I had fallen asleep and woken up for 22 years. The kitchen, where I cooked him breakfast, lunch, and dinner. His office, where he spun his intrigues and plotted my disappearance. I sat down on the couch in the living room and, for the first time in a long while, allowed myself to cry. Not from grief or self-pity, but from relief. The nightmare was over. I survived. I didn't let him destroy me. I won in the evening. Svetlana arrived with champagne and cake. I suggest we celebrate your return and your new life, she said, putting the bags on the table. Can you really celebrate a divorce after 22 years of marriage? I asked sadly. You can and must celebrate your salvation and freedom, Svetlana answered seriously. What happened is not the end, Toma. It's the beginning. And now it was up to me to decide how the story would continue. She was right. Everything that had happened, however painful, opened new opportunities before me. I could return to my work as a translator, travel, do what I truly loved, not what Nikolai approved of. I could make new acquaintances, discover new interests, simply live for myself, not for someone else. When we opened the champagne, I suddenly remembered that day when Nikolai gave me the trip to Turkey, a ticket to a new life. That's what he said back then. And he turned out to be right, though not in the way he had planned. That ticket really did open a new life for me, just without him. To a new beginning, Svetlana raised her glass. To a new beginning, I echoed, and thought, well, my dear, do you really regret this now? The ending of this story was written by me, not you. 6 months passed since that memorable day when I came back from Turkey and caught Nikolai off guard. Much had changed in my life since then. Some changes came easily, others with difficulty. But now, looking back, I realized each one was for the better. The divorce proceedings went faster than I expected. Nikolai didn't challenge my claims for the division of property. Evidently, he understood that, given the circumstances, he had no chance. The apartment remained with me as jointly acquired property. The country house inherited from my parents also stayed with me. Nikolai got the car and bank accounts, though they were nearly empty because of his debts. As for the criminal case on document forgery, it was still in progress. Nikolai fully admitted his guilt and actively cooperated with the investigation, hoping for a lighter sentence. Creditors, once they discovered the fraud, filed their claims against him. Things weren't looking good for him, but that no longer concerned me. I returned to my work as a translator. At first, it wasn't easy. 15 years of break made themselves felt. But language skills don't disappear, and modern technologies were quick to master. My old acquaintance Irina, who now headed a translation agency, helped me. She hired me part-time at first, then 3 months later offered me a permanent position. "You still have an excellent feel for language, Toma," she told me when I doubted myself. "An experience you can't buy for any money." Work gave me not only financial independence, but also faith in myself and my abilities again. I once more felt useful, competent, capable of solving complex tasks. That feeling was priceless after years of domestic existence, when my only achievements were a clean house and a delicious dinner for my husband. I started a small renovation in the apartment, just enough to change the atmosphere and get rid of the heavy memories. I changed the wallpaper in the living room, bought a new couch to replace the sagging old one, hung bright curtains. I turned Nikolai's office into my own study, with a comfortable desk, bookshelves, and a modern computer. "Now it's fully your space," Svetlana said, helping me arrange books on the new shelves. "No traces of the past." I updated the kitchen too, not completely, but with new curtains, a new tablecloth, new dishes. I didn't want anything to remind me of the old life, of the breakfasts I used to make for Nikolai, of his favorite mug with the words "best husband in the world." A new life required new habits. I enrolled in computer literacy courses to learn modern translation software I hadn't known before. I joined a swimming pool. The physical activity helped relieve stress and improved my sleep, which had become restless after all the turmoil. In April, when the first leaves appeared on the trees, I met with my children, my son and daughter from my first marriage. They lived in other cities, and we rarely saw each other, usually only on holidays, mainly because Nikolai didn't care much for my previous life and always found reasons to cut our visits short. We met in a cozy cafe in the city center. Anna, my daughter, came with her husband and their 6-year-old son, Misha. My son, Sergei, flew in alone. His wife stayed home with their little daughter, who had just turned 1. "Mom, you look amazing," Anna exclaimed, hugging me. "Slimmer, new haircut, you look younger. Divorce clearly did you good." Sergei smirked, hugging me too. "Haven't seen you this happy in a long time." "And I feel younger," I admitted as we sat down, as if I started a new life. Over lunch, I told them all the details of my Turkish vacation and everything that followed. I hid nothing: Nikolai's debts, the forged documents, even the story with Valentina. The children listened intently, sometimes gasping in surprise, sometimes shaking their heads in disbelief. "What a bastard," Sergei burst out when I finished. "I always felt he wasn't what he pretended to be. Too perfect, too smooth. And why didn't you tell us right away?" Anna asked reproachfully. "We would have helped, supported you." "I didn't want to trouble you," I answered honestly. "You know me, I'm used to handling things on my own." "And what could you have done from other cities?" "Come, for example," Anna retorted. "Stop him somehow. How did you live with him all those years?" I thought for a moment. Indeed, how did I not notice that the man beside me had long stopped loving me, that he was using me, manipulating, lying? Maybe I didn't want to see, or maybe I was just too used to a certain way of life and too afraid of change. "You know," I finally said, "Nikolai wasn't always like this. Or maybe he always was, but I didn't see it. When we met, he seemed reliable, calm, self-assured. Exactly what I needed after my divorce from your father." The children exchanged glances. They remembered those hard times. My first divorce, sleepless nights, tears, trying to rebuild life with 2 children in my arms. And they remembered how Nikolai had appeared, steady, hardworking, ready to take care of us. "The main thing is that now everything's good," Sergei said softly. "And you've become yourself again, Mom, the way I remember you from childhood. energetic, smiling with that spark in your eyes. You know what we need to do? Anna suddenly lit up. This summer, let's all go to the sea together. Us with Misha and Dima, Sergey with Lena and little Elisa, and you, a real family vacation. The idea appealed to me. During the years with Nikolai, I had rarely seen my grandchildren. He always found reasons to postpone or shorten those visits. But now I was free. I could plan my time as I wished, spend it with the ones I truly loved. Great idea, I agreed. Just not Turkey, please. I have a certain prejudice against that destination. We all laughed, and I felt warmth spread through my heart. My real family. They were here beside me. I didn't need Nikolai with his fake smiles and empty promises. After meeting my children, I became even more convinced that this new life was exactly what I needed, and that the divorce, however painful, had truly set me free. Svetlana supported all my beginnings. We often met, went to the theater, to the movies, strolled around the city, or sat in my kitchen with a glass of wine, reminiscing about youth and making plans for the future. Look how your life has turned out, she would say, and you were afraid you'd be left with nothing after the divorce? I didn't know I still had so much strength, I admitted. It seemed like at 52 was too late to start over. It's never too late for a new life, Svetlana smiled. The main thing is to want it. I didn't keep in touch with Nikolai, but sometimes I heard news about him through mutual acquaintances or from Mikhail Borisovich, who was still handling my case. Nikolai had moved in with his sister in a nearby city and found a job in a small company. As for Valentina and the baby, there was no news. Either she chose not to stay in contact after his disgrace, or he simply showed no interest. One day, returning from work, I ran into her at the supermarket. Valentina was noticeably rounder. She must have been 7 or 8 months pregnant. Hello, Tamara Sergeyevna. She greeted me first, a little embarrassed. Hello, Valentina. I smiled at her. How are you feeling? Thank you. I'm fine. I'm due to give birth soon. And Nikolai? I faltered, not knowing how to ask properly. No, we don't keep in touch anymore, she replied, understanding my unspoken question. After everything that happened, I decided it's better to raise the child alone than with such a father. I nodded, understanding her decision. If you ever need help, I began. Thank you, but I have my mom and my sister. They support me. Valentina fell silent for a moment and then added, You know, I thought a lot about what I'll tell my child when he grows up and asks about his father. I decided I'll be honest. I won't slander Nikolai Andreevich, but I won't sugarcoat things either. Let him know the truth and learn from other people's mistakes. That's a wise decision, I agreed. We talked for a while. It turned out Valentina hadn't lost her job. Despite the pregnancy, she was promoted to senior manager, and the management promised to keep her position. After maternity leave, she bought a small apartment on a mortgage. Her mother helped with the down payment. You've changed a lot, Valentina noted as we said goodbye. You look younger, happier. Freedom makes you younger. I smiled. When you live for yourself and not to meet someone else's expectations. There was a flicker of understanding in her eyes. We parted almost as friends, 2 women hurt by the same man, yet strong enough to move on. In May, almost a year after the failed trip to Turkey, I finally went on vacation, but not alone, this time with Svetlana. We chose Greece, Crete, with its ancient history, beautiful beaches, and amazing cuisine. Before the trip, I received an unexpected message. It came to my work email, and the sender was Nikolai. I stared at the screen for a long time, hesitant to open it. What could he possibly want to write after everything that had happened? Why remind me of himself at all? Finally, curiosity won, and I clicked. Toma, I know you'll probably delete this message without reading it, and in your place, I would too. But I have to write this, at least for my own conscience. I want to ask forgiveness, not for falling out of love. That happens, and no one is to blame. But for how I acted, for the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, for choosing the most cowardly path instead of an honest conversation. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know. I realize what I've done, and I pay for it every day. Valentina left me, and she was right to do so. I lost my job, my reputation, the respect of friends. But the worst part is that I lost myself. the man I once was, or at least wanted to be, an honest, decent man. I wish you happiness, Toma. You deserve it more than anyone I know, Nikolai. I reread the letter several times, trying to understand what I felt. Anger? Satisfaction that he was suffering? Pity? None of that. Only a strange calmness and the clear sense that this chapter of my life was truly over. I didn't reply. I simply closed the email and returned to packing. Whatever Nikolai felt, whatever guilt tormented him, that was his problem, not mine. I was moving forward and had no intention of looking back. At the airport, waiting for boarding, I recalled how it had all started, that morning when Nikolai handed me the travel voucher with such fake enthusiasm, how I found his correspondence with Valentina, how I cried in pain and betrayal. Back then it felt like my world was collapsing. But now here I was, sitting in the departure lounge, about to embark on a well-deserved vacation, filled with anticipation and feeling more alive than I had in years. "What are you thinking about?" Svetlana asked, handing me a cup of coffee from the vending machine. "About how strangely life turns out," I replied. "A year ago, I thought my world had fallen apart, that at 50-something it was too late and too scary to start over. And now you're a free, independent woman with an interesting job, friends, and plans for the future," Svetlana finished for me. "See? You never know where the road will lead you, or that a trip to Turkey could become a ticket to a completely different life." I smiled. Boarding for our flight was announced. We stood up, took our bags, and headed toward the gate. A new chapter of my life lay ahead, without fear, without regret, with an open heart and a clear mind. Who knew what surprises awaited me around the corner? But now I was sure I could handle them. My phone vibrated. A message from Mikhail Borisovich. "Tamara Sergeyevna, the court has sentenced your ex-husband. 2 years probation and a fine. Congratulations on closing this chapter. Have a good vacation." I showed the message to Svetlana. "Well," she said, "now you can officially close this story and begin a new one. Are you ready?" "More than ready," I replied, slipping the phone into my bag. The plane climbed higher, carrying me farther away from the past, from pain, from betrayal. Clouds floated below, while ahead awaited sunny Crete and a whole new life where I was no longer someone's shadow. "Well, Nikolai," I thought, looking out the window, "you wanted to get rid of me by sending me on a trip abroad. But thanks to that, I found the strength to start a new life. Without you, but with my true self. So thank you for that ticket. It really did change my life. Just not the way you planned." 3 years passed like a single day. My life had transformed so much that sometimes I could barely remember who I used to be. That frightened, insecure woman who couldn't take a step without her husband's approval now seemed like a stranger to me, a character from a book I once read and almost forgot. After the trip to Crete, it felt like I had been reborn. I returned home refreshed, sun-kissed, full of impressions, and determined to keep moving forward. Work at the translation agency gave me not only a steady income, but also genuine satisfaction. A year later, I was promoted to senior translator, and 6 months after that, I was asked to lead courses for beginners. "You have a gift for explaining complex things simply," Irina said when I doubted myself. "And you're patient and attentive, the perfect mentor." That's how another new path entered my life, teaching. Once a week, I taught a group of young translators, shared my experience, helped them navigate the subtleties of the profession, and to my surprise, I enjoyed it. Watching my students' eyes light up when they understood something new, seeing their confidence grow, was deeply rewarding. Eventually, I sold my old apartment. Too many memories, too heavy an atmosphere. I bought a smaller place in a new building with large windows overlooking a park. A bright one-bedroom apartment with a spacious kitchen and a balcony became my true haven, a place where I felt completely safe and happy. My relationship with my children also flourished. We saw each other much more often now. In summer, as planned, we all went to the seaside together, to Crimea, to a small town on the southern coast. For 2 weeks we swam, sunbathed, hiked, ate local fruit, and simply enjoyed each other's company. I especially cherished the time with my grandchildren. Misha, Anna's son, often spent school breaks at my place. We went to the zoo, the movies, read books, baked pies. I even started teaching him French. At 9, he picked up new words instantly. "Grandma, is it true that you used to work as a translator with important people?" he once asked as we walked back from the park. "Yes," I smiled. "A long time ago, before your mom was even born. And why did you stop?" I hesitated. How do you explain to a child that sometimes we abandon our dreams, talents, and calling for someone else, and that it isn't always the right choice? Sometimes adults make decisions they later regret, I finally said. I thought family was more important than a career. But in truth, you can balance both if you set your priorities right. Are you happy now? Misha asked with childlike directness. Yes, darling, very happy, I replied with complete sincerity, because I was doing what I loved and was surrounded by people who truly valued me. I hardly ever thought about Nikolai anymore. Sometimes his name would come up in conversations with Svetlana or with mutual acquaintances, but those mentions no longer brought pain or anger. Only mild bewilderment. How could I have tolerated for so long a man who had absolutely no respect for me? From Mikhail Borisovich, I knew that after the trial, Nikolai had finally moved to another city, where he got a job as a manager in a small company. He was paying off his debts little by little, but the process could stretch for many years. Things with Valentina didn't work out. She categorically refused to resume communication even for the child's sake. They said that Nikolai had really gone downhill, aged, started drinking, but that no longer touched me. His life was no longer part of mine. I ran into Valentina a few more times, by chance, in stores or on the street. Her son Artyom was growing up healthy and active, completely unlike Nikolai, neither in looks nor in character. Valentina returned to work when the boy turned 1 and, judging by all appearances, was coping well with the role of a single mother. You know, sometimes I'm even grateful to fate for everything that happened, she told me the last time we met. If it hadn't been for that conversation with you, I might have tied my life to a man who would have brought me nothing but pain and disappointment. I understood what she meant. In a way, both of us had won from that story with the trip to Turkey. We got rid of lies and manipulation and received a chance to build a new, more honest life. In the summer of the 3rd year of my new life, something happened that I absolutely did not expect. At the translation bureau where I worked, a new client appeared, an Italian company producing kitchen appliances. They needed a translator for negotiations with Russian partners, and Irina recommended me. I knew Italian well, though I hadn't practiced it for many years. Will you manage? She asked doubtfully. After all, it was specialized vocabulary, technical terms. Give me a week to prepare and I'll be in shape, I replied confidently. And indeed, the Italian came back to me faster than I expected, like riding a bike. Once you've learned, you never forget. I refreshed my grammar, expanded my vocabulary, reviewed technical documentation. By the time the negotiations day came, I felt quite confident. The Italian delegation was headed by Signor Marco Rinaldi, a tall, fit man of about 60, with graying temples and lively brown eyes. He turned out to be not only a professional in his field, but also simply a pleasant conversationalist, knowledgeable, with a subtle sense of humor, attentive to details. After 3 days of intense negotiations, when the contract was finally signed, Signor Rinaldi invited the whole team to dinner at an Italian restaurant. The evening was warm and relaxed. Marco told stories about his hometown Verona, about traditions, about his family. It turned out he was a widower. His children had grown up and moved away, and he himself, despite his age, had no intention of retiring because work gave him energy and meaning. La vita è troppo breve per non fare ciò che ami, he said, raising his glass. Life is too short not to do what you love. I translated this phrase for my colleagues, and everyone nodded in agreement. To myself, I thought those words could well become my motto. Late, but better late than never. After dinner, Marco offered to walk me home. It turned out that his hotel was not far from my neighborhood. You speak Italian wonderfully, he remarked as we walked through the evening streets. Where did you study? At the Institute of Foreign Languages, I answered. But then I didn't practice for many years. Così è la vita, you know. I know, he nodded seriously. Life often doesn't go according to the script we planned. My wife was also a translator, but after the children were born, she gave up the profession. Sometimes she regretted it. We started talking. It turned out we had a lot in common. Our love of classical music, old films, traveling to historical places. Marco told me about his wife, who had died of cancer 5 years earlier, about his daughter who lived in America, and his son, an architect in Rome. And you? He asked. Do you have a family? I briefly told him about my children, my grandchildren, and my divorce, without going into the details of Nikolai's betrayal. For some reason, I didn't want to spoil the evening with that story. You know what's amazing, Marco said when we reached my building. At our age, many people think the best is behind us. But I feel the most interesting part is just beginning. We are free from the obligations that bound us in youth. We have experience, wisdom, and understanding of what really matters. I feel the same, I admitted, as if I've been given a second chance. He smiled. In that case, may I invite you tomorrow on a tour of the city? I've been here before, but I'd like to see it through the eyes of a local. I agreed, surprised at my own spontaneity. Before, I would have thought it over 100 times, asked someone's advice, weighed all the pros and cons. Now the decision came easily, without doubt. The next day we met at the fountain in Central Park. Marco was in a light summer suit with a camera around his neck. A typical tourist, but with that special elegance only Italians seem to have. I showed him the old quarter with its merchants' mansions, the history museum, the embankment with its cozy cafes. He listened with genuine interest to my stories about the city's past, took photos of the views he liked, asked questions. Then we just walked, talking about everything in the world, books, politics, modern art. You are a very interesting conversationalist, Tamra, he said when we sat in a cafe on the embankment. It's so easy to talk with you about anything. You flatter me, I smiled, feeling a little shy. Not at all, he shook his head. I always say what I think. One of the advantages of age, you can allow yourself to be honest. In the evening, he invited me to a classical music concert. They played Vivaldi, and when the first notes of the Four Seasons began, I closed my eyes, letting the music carry me away. Marco sat beside me, and in the half-light of the hall I felt his presence, calm, reliable, without any tension. After the concert, he once again walked me home, and we stood at the entrance for a long time, reluctant to say goodbye. I'm leaving the day after tomorrow, he finally said. But if you don't mind, I'd like to stay in touch, right? Call, maybe invite you to Italy to show you the real Verona, not the one in tourist brochures. I'd like that, I replied simply, without coquetry, without pretense. We exchanged contacts, and Marco, taking my hand, lightly kissed it, a gallant European gesture that somehow made me blush like a girl. Arrivederci, Tamara, he said at parting. Arrivederci, Marco, I answered in Italian. As I went upstairs, my heart was beating fast and my soul felt light and joyful, like it hadn't in a very long time. The next day we met again, Marco's last day in our city. He came with a bouquet of yellow roses and invited me on a boat ride along the river. The day was sunny, warm. The water sparkled, reflecting the blue sky, and linden trees bloomed along the shore, filling the air with a honeyed fragrance. I want to tell you something, Marco said as we sat on deck, watching the landscapes drift by. I don't believe in coincidences, and our meeting feels like something more than mere chance. What do you mean? I asked, feeling my heart quicken again. A year ago, I lost interest in life, he admitted. Work, home, work, an endless circle. My children rarely called, my friends were busy with their own lives. I felt superfluous, unnecessary. Then my daughter suggested I travel, not just as a tourist, but with a purpose, a mission, to look for something or someone who could bring back my zest for life. He looked at me with his warm brown eyes. I found you, Tamra. I didn't know what to say. His confession was so unexpected, yet so sincere. Don't answer now, he smiled gently. Just know that for me, meeting you is the beginning of something new, and I hope it will be for you too. That evening we parted at my building, this time with a real kiss, tender and touching, like the very first kiss of youth. And the next morning Marco flew back to Italy, leaving me a small bronze lion as a keepsake, the symbol of Venice, the city he promised to show me the next time we met. We began writing to each other every day, first by email, then through video calls. Marco told me about his work, sent me photos of Verona, shared his plans. I replied with stories about my translation projects, my grandchildren, the life of our town. 2 months later, he came again, this time for a personal visit, not for work. We spent a week together, went to the theater, to museums, simply walked the streets, talking about everything under the sun. With him, it felt easy, calm, and interesting. I felt young again, full of energy and hope. Come visit me in Italy for Christmas, he suggested before leaving. I'll show you a real Italian holiday. I agreed without hesitation, without doubt. For the first time in many years, I felt that I truly wanted something for myself, not for someone else. In December, I flew to Verona. The city welcomed me with Christmas lights, the aroma of mulled wine and roasted chestnuts, and an atmosphere of celebration and magic. Marco was waiting at the airport with a bouquet of red roses and eyes glowing with joy. "Benvenuta a Verona, mia cara," he said, embracing me. His home turned out to be a small but cozy villa on the outskirts of the city, with a view of the hills and vineyards. There I met his family, his son Paolo, daughter-in-law Francesca, and little granddaughter Sophia, who immediately took my hand and led me to show her dolls. We celebrated Christmas all together, with a traditional Italian dinner of 7 courses, with gifts, with songs by the fireplace. I felt like part of this family, warm and close-knit, where everyone respects each other's space but is always ready to help in difficult moments. After the holidays, Marco showed me Verona, the city of Romeo and Juliet, with its ancient streets, squares, and cathedrals. We went to Venice, to Florence, to small mountain villages where time seemed to have stopped centuries ago. "Do you like Italy?" he asked as we sat in a little restaurant overlooking the sea. "Very much," I answered sincerely. "There's so much beauty here, so much history, and such amazing people. Could you live here?" His question sounded so simple, yet it carried so much. I looked at him, his graying temples, the wrinkles around his eyes, his warm smile. A man who had come into my life so unexpectedly, yet had so quickly become such an important part of it. "I could," I said. "But I have children, grandchildren, my work." "They could visit you," he said, "and you could work remotely. At our age, we don't have to choose one thing over another. We can have both." He was right. At 55, I could allow myself to live as I wanted, without sacrifices or compromises that make life unhappy. I had earned that right, to be happy, to love, and to be loved. "I'll think about it," I said, and Marco nodded understandingly. He didn't rush me, didn't pressure me, just showed me the possibility and left the choice to me. Back home, I told Svetlana about my impressions. She listened attentively, then said thoughtfully, "You know, Toma, when you talk about Italy and about Marco, your eyes shine. I never saw that look in you, not even in your youth. Don't you think this is more than just an infatuation?" I asked, though deep down I already knew the answer. "I think it's a chance," Svetlana replied, "a chance at true happiness, and it would be foolish to miss it." In February, Marco came again, this time with an official proposal, not of marriage. He understood that at our age, a stamp in the passport is not as important as the feeling itself, but a proposal to be together, in Italy, in Russia, anywhere, just to be by each other's side, to support one another, to share joys and sorrows. "We still have a lot of time ahead of us," he said, handing me a small velvet box with a ring, "and I want to spend it with you." I accepted his proposal. We decided that I would live in Italy for half the year and in Russia the other half, close to my children and grandchildren. Work remotely, travel, enjoy every day, every moment of life. And now, sitting on the terrace of Marco's villa with a cup of morning coffee, looking out at the vineyards below and the distant mountains, I often remember that story with the trip to Turkey. How Nikolai handed me the tickets, how I accidentally learned of his plans, how I decided to fight instead of giving up. That trip really did change my life. Not in the way Nikolai had planned, but even better than I could have dreamed. It led me to freedom, to my true self, to a new love, to the happiness I had earned. Thank you, Nikolai. I sometimes think with a slight smile. You wanted to get rid of me, but in reality, you helped me find my true self. And for that, I am truly grateful. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to click like and subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to keep bringing you new and captivating stories every day. On the main screen, you can already find our next story. We wish you all the very best and happiness in life.